한국 형사정책.
Hello, I'm Haesung from KIC. So our institute organizes these international fora every December of the year, inviting renowned experts to talk about cybercrime, corruption, and terrorism. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to transition the meeting to a virtual format, which leaves a lot of regrets on our part. But our international cooperation team actually has put in a lot of efforts to prepare for this meeting. And of course, it would have been great if we had an offline meeting. And KIC has done a lot of research. So what I would like to present to you is to introduce Korea's unique legal framework based on the research work conducted by KIC. So I would like to deliver my presentation on the topic of voice phishing. So voice phishing is not a traditional cybercrime per se. You had farming and fishing in the past. So this is a representative crime that would use cyberspace or cybercrime, as was the speaker from Canada spoke about. It is made of dotted organizations. It's an international organization using phishing and farming and conducting all of the attacks in the cyberspace. So this voice phishing can be perceived as a cybercrime. So you use private data using voice to phish that data. So this is a new words combining voice, private data, and phishing. If you look at the literature review in Korea, there have been largely two trends in Korea. It's a credit loan fraud that's requesting personal and financial information by luring potential victims into their fake websites. And the user would access the site and thinking that it is a real website would provide personal and financial information to that website. So the fraud, using that genuine personal and financial information, would go to the actual real site and enter that information to go through authentication process and take cash or to do a transfer of money into his or her account. That is what we have seen in terms of car loan fraud in Korea. So whether it is phishing or farming, they would use those tools to lure the user to a fake website. So how do we treat this under the current criminal act? That is a controversies or debates that we have, because the fake websites are used for committing a crime, and a user thinking that that is an actual site actually enter that information by him, herself, or herself, and the fraud would be able to utilize that information to take property from the actual site or make the cash card to extract money. That is a type of behavior that we saw. So from the point of the victim could think that I had no idea what was going on, and I thought that was a real, genuine website, and I put in my personal information and financial information. How would you be able to treat that as a fraud? Because it is actually seen as a pre-execute phase to fraud. So it is quite questionable whether that act of obtaining personal financial information can be admitted to this. So now let's take a look at the types of voice phishing frauds. There are 4 different types. First is compensation type. For example, this is a type of attracting victims for winning prizes or for refunding overpaid pensions, insurance, or taxes. The person would be lured to go to the ATM to put personal information to take the money out. Second is the security type. This is a type of attracting the victims from financial information, leaks, or involvement in crimes. So the person is told by the criminal that the person is at risk of infringement, so you would have to go to the ATM to put some money in to protect yourself. And the third is a blackmail type. This is, for example, deceiving victims into believing that their child has been abducted. The fourth type is charging duty. This is a type of attracting victims to pay membership fees for alumni associations or additional tuition fees. But as you can see from different typologies, for the blackmail type and for the charging duty type, the person is aware that the money is being provided to the criminal or to the person. So that's a punishable act, and the person is aware that the money is being transferred. But the problem actually occurs with the first two types, compensation and the security types. You will be able to learn from later examples that the person is not aware that the money is being issued from his or her account. Now, the person is not aware that the disposal of the property is being made. So whether that constitutes an element of fraud or not. Hence the controversies that we see in the current discourse. Let's take a look at the current criminal act of Korea. First of all, there has to be an act of deception. And from that, there has to be a disposal activity. And it has to lead to property losses or damages. And the person has to be aware of that. And once the property losses incur, then the fraud takes the gains made from the property disposal. Then it becomes an element of a crime for fraud under the current criminal act. But as you saw from the previous examples, there has to be an act of disposal of a property. Only then such behavior would constitute crime element. So let's go back to the fraud element again. Let's say that there's a refund type, or there's a security type, or blackmail type of an act. Let's say that this surprises occur, then the victim would have to do whatever is told by the criminal. And the criminal would impersonate himself or herself as a police officer and would tell the victim to do certain things, telling the person to go to the ATM, and he or she would tell the victim that the phone call will be made in 5 minutes, and then the victim goes to the ATM, will wait for the call to come through, and picks up the phone, and the fraud will give specific instructions as to, for example, what to do with the ATM. So this is the only way that you can, for example, clear yourself of any suspicions. So it's a luring activity. So the person will go through the authentication process with the ATM, and the authentication code will be given, for example, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or other codes will be given to the person, and also the security code will be given by the criminal. 245, 267, the codes will be given to the victim, but that's actually an account number of the criminal that will be used later on. And the security code is actually the amount of money that will be transferred out of the victim's account. So the victim has been deceived at this point. And so the victim has no idea that the money is being transferred out of her or his account to a criminal's account. So under the criminal act, this act is not perceived as a disposal activity. Because there's an absence of disposal, such act was not punishable under the fraud element. So there's a compensation type and the security type. There's a lack of disposal. However, for the blackmail type and the charging duty type, the victim actually transmits or transfers money out of the bank account, so any act of transfer would be punishable under the fraud crime. So again, the third and the fourth type can be punished under the fraud crime element, but the first and second cannot be punished under the fraud element. But fortunately, in 2017, such loophole was to be addressed. There was an on-bank Supreme Court decision made, especially looking at this very sophisticated and advanced voice phishing crimes. Even if there's an absence of disposal of a property, such credit card loans or security type or the compensation types could still be punishable under the fraud crime element, even if there was an absence of, again, the disposal of a property. So that was a decision made by the Supreme Court back in 2017. Nevertheless, because such en banc Supreme Court decision was not available, there was a argument that we would have to review this under the Criminal Act. Now, there is a computer-aided fraud crime which can be applied to the Voice Phishing Act. For example, the person is lured to the ATM to make a transfer. So the person, the victim, is actually used as an accessory to the crime. So the person is to be seen as a principal through innocent human agent. The criminal is to be seen as a principal through innocent human agent, because the victim was actually used in the act of crime. So in 2017, but the Supreme Court made that decision en banc. So this act of using an innocent human agent is still punishable by fraud crime element. Even if there is an absence of disposal of property under the voice phishing. So there was that Supreme Court decision made. So such voice phishing crimes can be punished as a fraud crime in Korea. And I want to introduce to you a very unique legal framework that we have. When we did the research before, for example, the victims would be deceived by voice phishing criminal, and within 20 minutes, other frauds, for example, the co-offenders would take that money out of the bank account and would transfer safely that money to another account. Then the victim will be made aware only then that he or she was deceived and would make a report, but you would have to make that report right away and to the police, and the money, the account would have to be frozen, which means that you have to actually go to the separate bank to ask for that request to put a freeze on the bank transactions, and it would really take up a lot of time. So in order for the person to actually get that money back, he or she would have to file a litigation. So there's a very long time period needed, also costing a lot of money. That is why the victim, in most of the time, would not be able to get a recourse for the damages, which led to these issues over the loopholes in the legal framework. So over the course of 1 year, the National Assembly was involved in this consultation, and a special act was legislated as a result. So the biggest change is that they were different reporting systems across the board. Some of the benchmarks were used from Japan and Taiwan. Now here, the victim is aware that he or she has been a victim of voice phishing, and a report will be made to the police. And the police will say, please wait, and we will talk to the financial authorities, and we will make a report. So please make sure to report to your financial authorities, for example, to ask for the suspension. So make sure that the person is able to wait online without hanging up the phone, and the financial authorities will answer the phone, and the request will be made by the victim for suspending the bank account transactions, and that request will be accepted right away. So that is what we're doing. So it's very real time. For example, you would have to separately report to the police and also to the financial authorities, and at least minimum 6 months will be needed in order to get a recourse for the losses. But once you make a report to the police, you'll be instantly rerouted to the financial authorities to make a request for the suspension of payment. And Japanese law was used as a benchmark. Let's say that the fraud doesn't show up, because a fraud will then have to admit that he or she has committed a crime. So the fraud doesn't actually appear. So up until that actual owner appears, then there's a 2 months of a bond waiting period, and unless the person appears, then the money will be put back to the original owner's account. That is the Special Act on the Prevention of Losses Caused by Telecommunications-Based Financial Fraud and Refund for Loss. In short, Voice Phishing Special Act. But still, the behaviors of crime are becoming very intelligent and diversified. So the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, as well as police agency and financial authorities, are working very hard in collaboration to respond to such voice phishing crimes. What I would like to emphasize is that the government, institute, or organizations would never request an individual to provide financial information, especially will never lure an individual to go to the ATM to put some number in. So don't be fooled, don't be deceived by voice phishing criminals. And if you have been deceived, you need to make a report to the police right away. That was quite a short presentation, but I've talked about the typologies of voice phishing in Korea and also the remedial procedures in place. And I will take questions later during the discussion session. Thank you.